Alright everyone, let's talk about the World Health Organization and their recent classification of gaming disorder as a type of mental health condition, along with other mental disorders or mental health problems, I guess is the more PC way of labeling it. But I think if you play video games so much so that your personal life is being affected by it, yeah, there's something wrong. It's an addiction. I don't see that as a controversial thing, and labeling it as a mental health condition as something incorrect. Because a lot of people are viewing this as too reactionary. Oh, gaming disorder is not a thing. People are overreacting because of those stories of Fortnite, that little girl that was addicted to Fortnite for a month straight, and she was going to school and she was just sleeping the entire time because she just stayed up all night playing Fortnite. And when I first heard that story, I was just thinking, what are these parents doing? Yes, I am not a parent myself, but I would imagine that if I had a young child who was that addicted to video games, that I would take action. And I remember the parents saying that they tried to take it away from them, but it didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? You're the parent. You have authority over your child. I don't understand this whole, I don't know. I feel like we live in a society where the parents just don't like to shift the blame on themselves for what's happening with their children. They like to shift on other people. When it comes to video games specifically, with the violent video games, my kid's playing this awful video game where people's heads are getting chopped off and all this shit. But meanwhile, it's you and you only that is able to restrict it. Passing laws that ban the game isn't really going to help you. And it's not fair to people who actually do discipline their children in the correct way and don't just have their Xbox as their babysitter. I mean, let's just be real there. But onto this article from CNN. You know how I feel about CNN, but it's pretty reliable source when it comes to at least stuff that's actually happening. Like they have their own spin on things, but it is a fact that the World Health Organization did classify gaming disorder as a mental condition. So they call it digital heroin, likening the flashing images to one of the world's most addictive substances. And now the World Health Organization announced gaming disorder as a new mental health condition, included in the 11th edition of its International Classification of Diseases. Well, considering that the World Health Organization considers gaming disorder to be a mental health condition but not gender dysphoria, you should take the World Health Organization as a grain of salt, what they classify and what they don't classify, because if you just want pure scientifically, if you're just looking at pure science, gender dysphoria is a mental disorder. And the fact that gaming disorder is viewed as a mental condition, but having the deep urge to chop off and mutilate your genitals is not a mental condition, and it's just trying to be yourself, then yeah, I can understand why people would take the World Health Organization not very seriously. But I think they're right on this one, though. The World Health Organization has followed the trends and developments which have taken place in populations in the professional field. I mean, we have a lot of cases of people who really have a serious problem. They have a problem with alcohol addiction. Gambling is a which actually could be related to gaming addiction, because a lot of these gaming stories, it has to do with microtransactions. So maybe those kids that keep buying the loot boxes on their parents' credit card, or even the adults that spend all their money that they got at work on microtransactions, then I think that should also be considered part of gambling addiction. But when they're talking about gaming addiction, they're specifically talking about people who just can't get the controller down, or their keyboard and mouse, or even their phone, whatever it may be. It's that the video game addiction has such an effect on their personal life. People aren't talking about, like, playing a video game for a while. It's like if you don't have that video game, like you can't. Like you have to have that video game. You have to have the controller in your hand. That's pretty much what they're talking about here, from what I'm gathering. And it's interesting, the related article here. Half of teens think they're addicted to their smartphones. So it's almost like our entire culture is hooked on technology. And I think maybe the gaming industry and gamers as a whole are kind of being unfairly singled out when we live in a culture where everyone's on their smartphone. How many people look down upon people who play video games all day? Meanwhile, they go out, they party, but when they're at the party, they're just sitting at their phone. So yeah, I do agree with the notion that the gaming industry and just your average gamer, culturally, in mainstream culture, even though gaming is a part of mainstream culture, oddly enough, it's just when a non-gamer looks at a gamer, they think of it as like, kind of like a social anomaly or something that is just not right. Playing video games all the time. But meanwhile, these same people are on their smartphones all the time, checking Twitter, checking Facebook. So maybe that should be considered an addiction as well. These are all very good points. But let's just continue reading on the article and then finalize our thoughts here. He said there are 3 major diagnostic features or characteristics of gaming disorder. One is that the gaming behavior takes precedence over other activities to the extent that other activities are taken to the periphery. That's kind of what I was going at before, and I completely agree. The second feature is impaired control of these behaviors. Even when the negative consequences occur, this behavior continues or escalates. A diagnosis of gaming disorder then means that a persistent or recurrent behavior pattern of sufficient severity has emerged according to the ICD. Another good starting point. Like, the first one makes a lot of sense, and the second one also makes sense. Like, your control over the situation is impaired. Like, you have no control, for lack of a better word, over your addiction. Like, you know that your addiction is not good. You know that it's causing a profoundly negative effect on your life, on your social life, your family life, whatever it may be, your education, but you still continue to play those games. Now, let's just move on to the third thing. I was going to say something, but I might as well just finish off here. Third feature is that the condition leads to significant distress and impairment in personal, family, social, educational, and occupational functioning. Yeah. So you're like, kind of like, in addition to the second point, you're not growing as a person. You're not developing relationships. You're not developing real relationships. It's affecting your personal life, your family life, your social life, your education, and your job, because, it's all these things. And this is not just gaming addiction, it's any addiction. So, obviously, these are the 3 things that that are the characteristics of the gaming disorder. And if you want me to speak personally about if I have these symptoms or not, I haven't picked up a controller in about 2 weeks or so. I've been playing PUBG Mobile recently. I've been messing around with it a little bit, but I don't consider myself to be a hardcore gamer even. And I also don't consider myself, that kind of sounds silly considering I have a gaming channel. I talk about video games a lot. But I don't know. It doesn't consume my life at all. If something interesting was going on, I would do that instead. But there's never been an instance where I've had to do something and I just don't do it and play video games instead. That doesn't really happen. Would I consider myself a smartphone addict is a better question. And I would say maybe to an extent, yeah. But so are most people in my age group too. Everyone I know, like, someone threw a surprise party for me last week. And when we were all hanging out, and almost everyone was on their phones for a while. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a thing that people do when they go out. Like, whenever my friends go out, they always have to pull out their phone. And I feel like that meaningful social interaction that that our predecessors had. We're not really having that in this generation. They came out with that study like a week ago or so, or even a few days ago, about teenagers, and that about a third of teenagers feel depressed and that they don't have like a purpose in life. And that kind of makes sense because the smartphone thing consumes you. Like being on your phone all the time, you're almost you're because the culture in the tech culture. No, I'm not saying it right. What am I trying to say? Like when you're on your phone, it's so focused on having likes and having followers, and it's all about recognition. So when people don't have the recognition that they want or that they feel like they deserve, I guess they feel sad and they feel left out. And also another point on the smartphone thing, people are always posting people are documenting their entire life on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and they're always posting all the amazing things that they're doing. Oh, I'm traveling to this country. Oh, I just got engaged, so on and so forth. And then you look at that and you're like, wow, compared to this person, my life is nothing, and you start feeling bad. I think that's really where the depression of the smartphone really stems from, is the whole emphasis on getting likes, having attention, and showing off your life to other people online. Even though you're not really enjoying life when you're spending all that time taking pictures and posting about your life when you're not really living it. I think that's a very important point to make. And of course, nothing I'm saying is new. I'm not pretending to be like some philosopher that is making up these new things. This is all stuff that we've heard before, but it's still, something to consider, especially my generation is especially afflicted by it. But even my parents, they're always on their smartphone now. So this is really a social crisis that goes beyond the millennial generation. Like, this is a problem now that applies to everybody except for maybe the baby boomers who refuse to go on the internet at all. And maybe that's for the best. I don't know. The main characteristics are very similar to the diagnostic features of substance use. Yeah, I noticed that. It's very similar to substance abuse and gambling disorder. They're symptoms or conditions to be classified as having gaming disorder. Gambling disorder is another category of clinical conditions which are not associated with a psychoactive substance use, but at the same time being considered as addictive as addictions. Yeah, I mean, they are addictions, without a doubt. And I think the fact that the World Health Organization is classifying it as a disorder can maybe spread awareness. And I'm not going to say action to be taken because that would imply regulation by the government. And I'm not really for that, or even the gaming industry regulating itself even further than the ESRB. But, I mean, parental controls suffice enough. People should be allowed to play however long they want, whenever they want. And there really shouldn't be restrictions on that. Like we have restrictions on alcohol. You have to be 21 to buy alcohol. With substance abuse, certain substances are illegal. And the ones that are legal, you have to be 18 or 21, depending on where you live. I don't think regulations like that really are going to fix the problem, because this has nothing to do with this is something like 3-year-olds are being exposed to iPads. They're not even playing with their toys anymore. People, that's really the main reason why Toys R Us failed, that a lot of people don't talk about. People are saying, well, it has to do with Amazon and people are buying their toys online. But are people even buying toys at all? I mean, all the toddlers that I know, they're always on their iPad or a smart device. They don't care about playing with toys. Like even my generation. I sound old. My generation, when I was a kid, in the early to mid 2000s. And it's so different now than it was when I was a kid. It wasn't even that long ago, maybe like 10 years ago. Millions of gamers around the world, even when it comes to the intense gaming, would never qualify as people suffering from gaming disorder. Okay, so that's a good point to make. So when people are saying that this is a reactionary thing, it's an exaggeration, gaming disorder isn't really a thing, Or, you're classifying gamers that just like to play their games as being mentally ill or having a mental condition and they need help. And this is a good point. Like, even when it comes to people who intensely play video games, like a lot of people who are watching probably are, that does not mean you're an addict. The only time you're an addict, the only instance is if, let's say you have to do even a minimal task, like going to the bathroom, you piss yourself. This is the type of, serious issue we're talking about. We're not talking about people who just do nothing but play video games all day, and they spend 8 hours a day playing video games, or even longer than that. It depends on the context. If you play video games 8 hours a day but you're a kid, and also you don't have anything better to do for the day, then that doesn't mean you're an addict. That just means you're killing time. You know what I mean? They're not trying to say that you're an addict if you play a lot of video games. They're not measuring it by hours. They're measuring it by the actual effect that it has on your life and your social development. And that's really what it boils down to here. I'm just trying to see if I missed anything important here. It's just some more psychology mumbo jumbo. If you want to read up on it, you can if you want, but interesting quote here. I think it's a game changer, although how quickly the game will change, I don't know. And understand the nature of the behavior and what can be done in order to improve the situation. And interventions may also be needed. Yeah. No shit. Intervention should be going on right now for these kids that are addicted to their games, or even adults that are addicted. The people that are in their lives need to do something about it. And you can spread all the awareness you want, and that's great, but it's ultimately up to the person that's in that. It's ultimately up to the family member or the parent or whatever it may be to remedy the situation. That's really what it is. World Health Organization hopes that inclusion of gaming disorder in the classification will stimulate debate as well as further research and international collaboration. Yeah, I think this is overall a good thing. Let's look at the disagreement before we make our conclusion. Anthony Bean counts himself a member of the camp that opposes inclusion of gaming disorder. It's a little bit premature to label this as a diagnosis. I am a clinician and a researcher, so I see people who play video games and believe themselves to be on the lines of addicted. More of a coping mechanism for either anxiety or depression. But again, they said earlier that even if you spend countless hours on playing video games, it doesn't necessarily mean you're an addict. Again, it's all about the context. If you are supposed to go out on a date with your wife or your girlfriend or whatever, and you just say, no, I'd rather play video games, or, if you're supposed to use just basic tasks like taking a piss, taking out the garbage, doing, those basic everyday tasks, brushing your teeth, you know what I mean? Going to sleep. That's a really thing. That's killing people. In China, especially, these internet cafes where people are not going to sleep because there's too much into the game and then they die because I think, no circulation in their blood. That's usually what kills them because they're sitting down for an extended period of time and they're just not getting blood flow in their brain, and it's just not good. Yeah, this is a huge epidemic, and I think this is ultimately a good thing. I don't really buy the disagreement. My anxiety and depression is dealt with, the gaming goes down significantly. Okay, I understand the point that they're making now. At first, I thought they were saying, well, people who play a lot of video games do it because of depression and anxiety, but I think what he was actually trying to say was that people who do have those conditions where they can't even go to the bathroom and they're so hooked onto the video game, the rooting cause of it is depression or anxiety. But that really is the case for every addiction, though. So I don't really buy this argument. Well, you can't call gaming disorder a thing because, well, the underrooting problem is anxiety and depression. They use the virtual role as an escape to that. But at the same time, People use alcohol as that means of escape. People use things that are considered by everybody to be a disorder as their coping mechanism. So I don't buy the whole argument that this is premature and that this is not appropriately informed. I don't buy it. I don't buy the argument that this is somehow a misdiagnosis or this shouldn't be considered a mental condition. Because ultimately, like, the whole argument is that, well, you can't call gaming disorder a mental health condition because the underrooting problem usually is depression and anxiety, and then when you get rid of the depression and anxiety, the addiction is usually remedied. But doesn't that also apply to a lot of alcoholics and other addicts? I mean, the only one I can't think of is nicotine, where there's a serious mental... What was I saying? I just got a message, so I got distracted. I lost my train of thought. That's what sucks about recording on your phone. You have, like, intrusions. But what I was saying is that the only time where I really can't see, like, oh, depression, anxiety is the underrooting cause is, like, deep substance abuse, like substance where you're, like, actually hooked onto the, like, nicotine addiction. But we have other mental conditions that are viewed as mental conditions, and even alcohol. How many people drink alcohol? Almost everybody, but are they all technically addicts? You can argue maybe, but most people would say no. So, be okay. He's not saying that doesn't exist. He just thinks it's not really a good idea to go forward with this diagnosis. It really opens the door for anything to be a sickness. Again, I guess I kind of understand where he's coming from, but coming from someone who is a gamer and talks about video games on the internet, I would say that I actually agree with the World Health Organization. I absolutely agree. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree that gaming disorder is an actual disorder? Or not? Let me know in the comments down below.